Joining me today is New Hampshire State Representative Steve Smith. So, Steve, in the last segment, we sort of talked about something that I never, it's the little things the legislature does that are actually kind of important. The sort of debate on aftermarket parts for, 6-month-old cars that have gotten in a car accident versus original parts. And I'm just amazed at some of the small things that actually affect people's lives. So we've got that. I'm also curious about some of the major issues. And it's sort of that dichotomy that the state works in, from these very small issues to the major issues like the opioid crisis. That affects us across the board in the state. And it affects so many different areas, and it affects so many different communities. What's your take on where we are with handling of that sort of crisis?
I think it's amazing that we got as much done as we did, considering how the legislature works in the short time frame. Essentially, we process all our bills in the House in 90 days, and that can be as many as 1,000 bills. So we start in January, and we send them all to the Senate by the end of March. But in this case, it took on a life of its own. We had presidential candidates coming through from the primary that made this a big deal. Governor Chris Christie, he went through a few weeks where it was all he talked about. He held meetings in Manchester. YCN News covered an event that we did in Newport, and his wife was there, and we talked about it there. So one of the things we did to try to shepherd this and really make sure that there was a focus was create a joint legislative committee, a task force, if you will.
Senate and House.
Senate and House, yeah, that would focus on this. And it's important to have both chambers involved, because one of the things that happens is they have to agree on the final version of any passed bill. So if you begin by working together, it streamlines that process. There were some interesting things that came up. The drug court issue. So we get buzzwords and people latch onto them, and all of a sudden maybe we don't really know what it is, but that's the big thing. So drug courts were one of them. Everybody should have drug courts, they said. Okay.
So what does that buzzword mean?
It actually depends on where you are. But generally, it's a court program in New Hampshire, typically administered through the Superior Court system, where drug offenders go in, and it is a given that the sentencing will include treatment and aftercare afterwards in the community.
As opposed to just time.
Right, exactly. So this is why it's important to read the bills. There would be grants, because we can't require anyone to do that in the state without funding it, unfunded mandates. So they had a bill come through that would provide grants for drug courts, and in Sullivan County, where I'm from, we don't have one. We have the Trails program, which actually has a higher, it's more effective at reducing recidivism than a traditional drug court system. But drug court's the word. So they did an evaluation of what counties were doing, and there were 3 columns, have a drug court, have Superior Court involvement. I forget what the third one was. And 7 counties had check boxes, and then you get Sullivan County blank, like we're doing nothing. So,
and the irony is what Sullivan County is doing with their Trails program may actually be more effective.
Yes. So I called the chair of Finance Division 2, who was working on that, and said, that's Representative Umberger. Karen, why does this report say that Sullivan County does nothing? We actually spend a good chunk of money on this. And she worked with Senator Bradley, who was the prime sponsor of the bill, and realized that not only was the Sullivan County program a good one, it's administered by the Department of Corrections, which is a little unusual, but they do have field people afterwards, and they do continue monitoring and give support and try to help them find jobs, because there usually is incarceration as well. Such a good program that actually Carroll and Belknap counties are going to copy that, use it as a model to implement in there. So we were able to get them to incorporate, they made up a definition for the Trails program, attached it to the bill, and those 3 counties will get their grants. Sullivan County to sustain theirs, and Carroll and Belknap to institute theirs.
And that's really an interesting, where you look at it, and I think Sullivan County is doing a number of good things in their corrections facility, and it doesn't get seen.
It doesn't. We are the country bumpkins out there. We have 13 representatives, and you have Hillsborough, which has over 100. 53% of everybody in New Hampshire lives in Hillsborough and Rockingham counties. So what happens there gets the most attention.
No, speaking of attention, I got to attend to a commercial break. But when we return, we're going to continue our conversation, focusing on some of the things the Representatives Committee dealt with. So please stay with us.